Chapter 1. It had been a cold and snowy winter in Salem, Massachusetts. Jake and Megan were looking forward to having the Green Lady Inn up and running in time for Easter. Easter was late this year, which left them with about 2 weeks to work with. The old house Megan's grandmother had left her needed a lot of work. Her gran had been losing her eyesight and had left a bit of a mess for Megan to clean up. They had replaced and put in all new electric and plumbing, as well as a new roof. Even the foundation needed to be shored up, or the place was going to crumble beneath them. The house had been built in 1850 and had not had major work done in all that time. Megan felt bad that Jake was spending most of his own money on the renovations. She felt the house should be her responsibility, but she just didn't have that kind of money, and he did. Each morning she opened the front door and stood with her hands on her hips, checking on the flower bulbs she'd planted last fall. She watched the crocuses pushing their way through the warm soil a little bit more every day. They would be followed by the daffodils and tulips. She remembered the wonderful flowers her gran had grown. She was determined to get some more gardening books and bring back the garden to honor her gran. She had already found a beautiful book about a British horticulturalist, Gertrude Jekyll, in the bookcase in the sitting room. Miss Jekyll had been a great influence in English gardens, and even had a rose named after her. There was a nice backyard as well. It backed up to a bit of woods which separated it from the houses behind. There were some rhododendrons and azaleas in there that would be blooming soon. Maybe she would plant some daffodils along the edge of the woods and let them naturalize and spread. She could picture how pretty it would look in the spring. Whirling around in her head were plans for a patio and barbecue area. How nice it would be for her guests to have a seating area outside where they could talk and maybe share a drink or two. The yard was big enough for a swing set and a climbing frame of some kind. She would add that to her idea list that was getting longer all the time. Back inside, she got busy setting up the reception area in the alcove under the curving staircase. The black and white tile in the foyer had been cleaned and polished until it glowed. Gone was the old dusty smell that had greeted her when she first came. She wanted to create the perfect impression when her guests came to stay. "Jake, can you come here, please?" Megan called out, hoping Jake was within hearing distance. He was upstairs painting one of the guest rooms.
"What's up?"
Jake asked, popping his head over the second-floor banister. "The desk I bought for under the stairs is wobbly. See?" Megan called out, shaking the antique desk to show Jake. "This was one of the few things you let me buy with the proceeds from the sale of my gallery in New York. I'm so glad that my assistant could buy me out, but I sure will miss it. By the way, Jennifer said she wants to be one of our first guests when we officially open the Green Lady Inn for business. I better send her an email that we're almost there so she can make some plans."
"I'll wedge a little something under the legs to steady it before we open,"
Jake answered, coming down the stairs and giving the desk a shake. It had been almost 2 years of hard work getting the Green Lady ready for her debut. If Jake hadn't had to be away so much promoting his newest book, it would have been finished a lot sooner. Megan rested her dark auburn head on his shoulder while he put his arm around her, holding her close. "Thank goodness we found Ernesto," she said. "He's a great handyman and good to have around when you're off on one of your book tours. Speaking of book tours, I haven't seen you working on your next book very often," she said. Megan worried that fixing up the inn was taking time away from Jake's career as an author. He had been a bestseller on the New York Times list a couple of times now. His book signings were always a sellout. It didn't hurt that he was a bit over 6 feet tall, with eyes to get lost in and a rogue curl of dark hair that always fell over his forehead. He'd had all the woman fans crying when his marriage to Megan was announced by his publicist. "When is Ernesto due back from visiting his daughter?" Megan asked. Ernesto's granddaughter was making her first communion, and he had gone to Tampa, Florida for the occasion. Relatives from all over the country were gathering, Religious ceremonies were a big deal in his Spanish culture.
He'll be back in another couple of days, I think. I could sure use some help with getting these rooms ready,
Jake said. He liked puttering around in the inn. His writing had become more of a job than a pleasure. His agent and publicist were always trying to rush him to finish the next book. He liked taking his time and letting the story he was writing lead the way. The front doorbell rang out just as Jake was turning to go back upstairs to finish painting the Buttercup room. Megan and her friend Amanda, who lived next door, had decided to name all the guests' rooms after wild flowers. Jake had gone along with it, figuring it was a girl thing. Megan shrugged when Jake asked,
Are we expecting anyone?
Jake looked through the side light in the door and mouthed,
Prendergast.
to Megan. Megan started to dash into the kitchen, but Jake grabbed her arm, saying,
Don't you dare.
He held her fast so she couldn't escape their visitor. If he had to see him, so did Megan. Jake opened the heavy oak door and greeted their unexpected visitor.
Hello there, Mr. Prendergast. We weren't expecting you.
This was the last person he wanted to see today.
I know, but I was passing by and thought you might like to know that I have the Green Lady listed on the Around Salem website as a new and welcoming guest house in town. My assistant is doing a wonderful job keeping the site up and current on all that's going on. I'm sure your rooms will be filling up as soon as the word gets out.
Mr. Prendergast wobbled his rotund frame into the foyer and looked around.
You certainly have done a wonderful job of bringing life back into this old house. Still wish I could have bought it off you when your grandmother died, but you have done a remarkable job.
When Megan and Jake had first met him, the odd man had reminded them of the penguin from the Batman movie. Now he just annoyed them. He was aggressive and didn't take no for an answer easily. But he had the know-how and the connections they needed to make the Green Lady succeed. Megan and Jake stood in stunned silence. Jake spoke up first.
Mr. Prendergast, I sent you an email to hold off on any listing until we were actually ready to accept guests. We have 3 of the 5 rooms finished, and I'm working on the 4th today. Not to worry, Jake,
The realtor said.
I'm sure you can handle a reservation or 2. I don't think anyone will be booking until the Easter weekend anyway. We want to give visitors a chance to see your listing and make an informed decision.
He walked further into the foyer and looked around. He noticed the reception desk and glanced into the seating room across from it, nodding his head in appreciation of the small changes he noticed. The house had been in bad shape when Megan had inherited it. They'd had a lot of basic cleaning to do first. Megan's grandmother had been losing her sight and hadn't noticed the dust building up. A little cleaning and fresh paint had done wonders for the old house, though. You should have asked before listing us on the website, Megan said. I don't even have a computer set up to take the reservations. I need to hire someone to help me cook and clean when we do have guests. We are just not ready for anyone yet. Megan's Irish temper was rising, and her green eyes flashed. She didn't like being pushed into anything, and Prendergast was a pushy little toad. Right now, all she wanted to do was squish him. Jake heaved a resigned sigh.
Okay, if we get any calls, we'll just have to tell them we're not ready to open for another couple of weeks. Good, then I'll leave it on the website, and it's ready when you are,
Prendergast said, huffing himself up to his full 5'4".
The spring tourists are right around the corner, and you should speed things up so you're ready for them. You have done a marvelous job here. Well, I'm off. I'll call around another time and see how you're doing.
With that, the realtor opened the front door, waved his hand in the air, and marched to his waiting car. I know he is giving us a discount for listing us on the website, but I still want to strangle him. He never listens and always does exactly the opposite of what I want, Megan said, closing the heavy door.
Let's get some coffee and see what we can do about getting ready sooner.
Jake, always the practical one, said. Megan tossed her dark auburn hair in frustration and followed him into the kitchen. For a while after her grandmother died, they had suspected Prendergast of the murder. He was not one of Megan's favorite people at the best of times. It always seemed that he went out of his way to do the opposite of what she wanted. Megan had run her own art gallery in New York and was used to being her own boss. Running an inn in Salem, Massachusetts was a whole new experience for her. Megan put the coffee on, and Jake got the mugs and some cookies out of the cupboard. The kitchen was the last room on the list to be renovated. They thought they would have been up and running by now, but the repairs to the foundation and the roof had held them up for months. The kitchen still had the odd cracked linoleum on the floor and a stove that worked when it felt like it. The decor was right out of the 70s with an avocado fridge and no dishwasher. The wallpaper was coming off in places and was a hideous mix of avocado and bold blue flowers. The cupboards were falling apart. Jake and Ernesto had been kept busy releasing stuck drawers and screwing doors back on. The house might have been wonderful at one time, but it had long since lost its appeal. Funny you never noticed these things when you were a child, she mused. She had visited often before her parents died. Time just seems to slip away.
When is Jeff coming to install and program the computer for the reservation desk?
Jake asked, pouring the hot coffee in the mugs. He's supposed to be here this afternoon. I'll have to learn the booking program and a bookkeeping program. I know I can do it. I just need him to show me. Lydia Cooper is coming over so she can learn at the same time, said Megan.
She's happy to work part-time?
Jake asked. Oh, she was thrilled that it was a part-time so she can work during school hours and it will work in the summer too. Her two boys can play with their friends and she won't be far away. Since she only lives a couple doors down, it works for both of us. She said her daughter, Emily, would like to work on the weekends. Emily is a high school senior, good with computers, and needs the money. I only need to find a part-time housekeeper for now until business picks up. I have an idea that I would like to have the dining room set up as a tea room open to the public. What do you think? Megan could imagine the tea room all set up with small round tables, with colored tablecloths and lace curtains at the windows. Her gran had left a couple of sets of good china and an assortment of china teacups and saucers. She knew she had plenty in that department, as well as serving plates and silverware. The more she thought about the tea room, the more she was determined to make it happen. Another thing on her list.
You're just full of ideas today.
Jake laughed.
Whatever you want, I'm sure we can handle. What about the studio over the garage? I thought you wanted to do some teaching.
I still do. Once we get the inn going, I'll concentrate on that. I want a shop in the garage to sell my watercolors and those of my students, too.
Looks like I'd better get busy on that novel. I'm in the middle of writing. I'd like to get some royalties coming in.
Jake, there's something else I need to talk about. Megan hesitated.
Not another project, I hope.
No, it's not another project. I've just been having this weird feeling the last few days. Like something, I don't know, like when I say to answer the phone before it rings.
I've learned to trust your feelings, so go on.
Jake said, bracing himself. Something is up, and I can't put my finger on it. She twisted the emerald-set claddagh ring her gran had left to her round and round on her finger. The gift of the ring had set off a chain of events that had led to the discovery of a fabulous emerald and gold necklace. When Mr. Halloran, her gran's attorney, had presented the ring to Megan at the reading of her grandmother's will, it had caused her to have visions of the past, or so she thought. It was these visions that had helped her find the clues to a lost family treasure, a rumor that had been passed down through the family. Along the way, with the help of Jake and her neighbors Amanda and Zach, they had solved the murder of her grandmother and her grandmother's friend, Clarissa. They had followed Megan's visions and clues left by her ancestors over 150 years before. Cousins unknown to her at the time had also been after the family treasure. They were caught and were now sitting in Walpole Prison.
When you get close to an answer, let me know. I've got a very yellow room to paint.
Jake stood and took his cup to the sink. As he was leaving the kitchen to finish painting the room upstairs, the front doorbell rang. "I think that might be the computer guy," Megan said as she went to answer the door to welcome Jeff Peltier, a tall and sandy-haired young man of about 20-something. His blue-green eyes sparkled in the morning light. Megan at one time had asked to paint his portrait, and she was still hoping to talk him into it. That was, if and when she could set up her studio and make the time. Jeff was studying at Boston College and needed any computer work he could get to help pay his way. "Hi, Jeff. We've set up the reception area right here under the stairs. The new computer is in those boxes, and the phone company brought in a line for the phone and the computer there." Megan showed him where she wanted everything and left him to get on with setting things up. "Call me when you're ready to install the hotel booking program. I hope it's not too complicated." Megan was not a whiz on the computer. "I have to teach Lydia Cooper and her daughter Emily how to use it."
"I picked out the easiest one I could find for you," Jeff said. "I know Emily Cooper, and she can figure out anything. I saw her around the high school. She was a couple of years behind me."
"Great. I'll be in the kitchen trying to sweet-talk the stove to work so I can make Jake some dinner tonight." Megan was walking toward the kitchen when she saw their black cat, Magic, wander down the stairs. The cat had evidently been in the room that Jake was painting, as yellow splotches and stripes decorated his silky black fur. "If that silly cat gets in the way, stuff him in an empty box and he'll play away in there for ages with the wrappings and paper," she called to Jeff. Megan had found him as a tiny kitten shortly after her arrival in Salem. The poor little thing had been playing in a clay plant pot on the back porch. It had scared the already wary Megan, but seeing him, her heart had melted, and she took him in and called him Furball until her wedding to Jake. It was then he had been christened Magic. She should have named him Trouble, because he was always close to any that came around the inn. "I like cats. I'll find things for him to play with. Don't worry about anything. We'll have this up and running in no time." Megan headed back to the kitchen again. She said a silent prayer to whatever saint watched over cooks or kitchens to please let the stove hold out a little bit longer. Jeff was true to his word and had the new computer system up and running in about 30 minutes. Magic was playing happily in the empty computer box. Jeff wandered into the kitchen and retrieved Megan, having her sit down at the keyboard. "No need to worry," he said. "The program is foolproof. You can't book a room until you have checked the previous guests out of it first." "So there's no chance of putting Mrs. White from Washington in with Mr. Brown from Rhode Island, then?" "Nope. Can't happen unless that's what they ask for." Jeff laughed and showed Megan how to change the price of the rooms for the different seasons. He was taking a business course and had lots of little tips on how to run the program and the small inn. Jake came down after finishing his painting and stood behind them, watching how to use the program just in case. He smelled of paint and sweat.
"At least I'll have some idea on how to check if rooms are available and which ones."
He caught sight of Magic jumping out of the box.
"Any ideas on how to get yellow paint off a black cat?"
he asked, laughing. "You're on your own there. I only do computers. They don't scratch." Jeff laughed back. "We're almost finished here," Jeff said.
"Good. I'll go wash up and set the table for supper. You did get that stove to cooperate, I hope. I'm starving."
"Today? Yes. There's a nice roast chicken for you tonight. See you in a bit." Jake reached over and kissed Megan on the cheek, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. He went to clean up. After a few more minutes of instruction, Megan was happy she now knew enough about the new program to explain it to Lydia and Emily. Lydia was running a bit late, and she hoped she would turn up soon. "Thanks a million, Jeff." She handed him an envelope with his fee inside.
Thanks, Megan. If you run into any problems, give me a call.
She saw Jeff to the door, gave her ring a twist, and went to join Jake in the kitchen for an early supper. Magic followed on her heels, looking for his supper too. The cat didn't know it, but a bath was in his future. Thank goodness for washable paint.